I'm here because of Mother Teresa and the mercy of God. But I want to thank Lady, Mike Sheedy, all my friends here. As you heard in the introduction, which was beautiful, I wrote it. No, I'm kidding. All it shows is that I can't keep a job, basically. I bounced around a bit. But they're nice. It's nice. We have an office in Tallahassee, still aging with dignity. Paul Malley's here. Paul's over here to the left. And he and I, after Mass, will be over in the center. I'm not here to give a talk on my book. It's the last thing I'm going to do is promote this. Beautiful book. But I will be there for a little bit after Mass in case you're interested. And I won't be talking about my story and how I met Mother, because that may be a question you have. How did you end up traveling with her and working with her during those last 12 years of her life? So that's in here, but the sisters had asked me to write it, and I was happy to. And I've been grateful that the sisters, like, they were my primary audience. I said, I wanted to be an authentic account. Because sometimes when we write about our saints, we ascribe to them, we turn them into little plastic statues and ascribe to them all these ethereal qualities. And I wanted the book to tell the story of this woman, this mother, this gritty Albanian who loved to laugh, who loved her sisters, missed them when she was away from them. When she would see them, I would drive her up to convents and she'd get out and she'd grab the sisters by their faces and engage with them. And she just loved life. She loved to read. Her formal education stopped when she was 18, but she had voracious appetite to read. She was a teacher at heart and in fact taught for the first 17 years of her religious life. I was just in the Adoration Chapel to see so many of our religious there adoring Jesus, their spouse, that union with God. Well, Mother lived that beautiful life of prayer, but she was balanced and she was human. She was impatient and stubborn. She went to confession regularly. She didn't go to confession and say, "Bless me, Father, I've got nothing for you." Mother sinned. She could be short with people sometimes. She could be quick to correct. She understood this. She saw that she said, "I'm a pencil in God's hand." She was that little humble pencil. And I think it's appropriate on a day like today, when Saturday's traditionally been the day dedicated to the Blessed Mother, that we're in this beautiful basilica in honor of the Queen of Heaven, Queen of the universe, that we will be talking about lessons from Mother Teresa, who I think was the most Mary-like person since Mary, that she was virgin and mother to the world. She spent so much of her life pronouncing the greatness of the sanctity of life, the human dignity of every individual. That little unborn child, that dying man in her home for the dying in Calcutta. I talk about when I met Mother in Calcutta in 1985 and how she sent me to her home for the dying. She spoke of the dying as Jesus in his distressing disguise. And this idea that this truth that Jesus resides in that unborn child, resides in that poor man in the gutter, in that individual, the dying. This is why you're here on this Saturday, on Respect Life Day, to not only renew yourselves in your commitment at this conference. I admire what the Florida Catholic Conference does. Bishop Noonan's been a long, long time friend of mine, back when he was a pastor, a priest in Miami, and to see the beauty of his leadership in this diocese. To be here on a Saturday in honor of Our Lady, to think about this woman, Mother Teresa, this mother, this protector of life, this advocate for life, who pronounced that greatness that we heard spoken to the angel Gabriel, that when angel Gabriel spoke to Mary, great will be his dignity. That pronunciation of the sanctity of life that we're all sharers of, that this child Jesus, given to her, would remind each one of us of this greatness to which we're called. And Mother pronounced it in her actions. And I think when we look at the theme of this conference, those words of Mary, I'm the handmaid of the Lord, let it be done unto me according to your word. But she said also that God who's mighty has done great things for me. Holy is his name. You've been called to this work. This isn't an accident. You're here on this Saturday. It's not an accident you devote your time and efforts to the work that you do. You've been called to this work because God, who is mighty, has done great things for our Blessed Mother, great things for Mother Teresa, and great things for you in your vocation, in your calling. To hear Ingrid in her calling, how she's giving her life in defense of some of the people that are easiest to dislike in the world, those who've committed heinous crimes. And there she is, giving her life in defense of this sanctity of life. What the Florida Catholic Conference does, Mike Sheedy, my colleague Paul, that's been at Aging with Dignity 27 years. We all do our little parts, don't we? Earlier this week, I was at Ethel Kennedy's funeral in Washington. I don't know if you saw any coverage of it. She had 11 children, complicated woman. And I was sitting there, and sitting right here in the front row, and I was over here, so I had a bird's eye view, was President Biden, President Obama, President Clinton, Nancy Pelosi. It was very interesting to see them, and they're aging. They're aging. None of us is going to live forever. And this is one of the reasons why I was thrilled to be able to come and talk about how Mother Teresa aged in ways that it might inspire you on your journey. I see so many young people here too. That's beautiful. My son Jamie now works with me at Aging with Dignity. He recognizes the covenant among the generations that reminds us that when we're young, we'll be cared for, and when we're older, we'll need someone that'll care for us. Mother Teresa allowed herself to be loved as she aged. I met her the week she turned 75. I tell the story in here, but she bounded out like a schoolgirl when I met her, full of life, the week she turned 75. She was so focused. She was everything I wasn't. So focused, so serious, in love with her faith. I wasn't practicing my faith. I was selectively choosing what I'd follow, what I'd live. I had no real relationship with Jesus Christ, the love of our lives, the reason we're here. I was just simply floating through life in successful positions, but I wasn't out there living my faith. And yet there was this woman, and I wanted to meet her. And so the U.S. Senator I worked for sent me on a trip, and I thought, I'm going to go through Calcutta on the way back, and I met her, and it changed my life. The story's in here, but it's more stories. That's just at the beginning, and they wanted it in there so that people would know who I was. To tell how Mother Teresa allowed herself to be used. She told me once, she said, pray this prayer, use me without consulting me. It's a beautiful prayer, to be used without being consulted, through your friendships, through your relationships. And she said she was a pencil, a humble pencil in the hand of God that he wrote love letters to the world with. A reminder of what God can do with humble hearts, individuals given to him, individuals given to the love of Jesus Christ in a world that's thirsting for meaning and direction and purpose. This election has us all concerned. We don't see America's best at the top of the ticket. We see all the challenges in the world. I'm not here to make a political statement, because the fact is our hope is not in government. It's in Jesus Christ. And the work we do is centered on that. We deal with government. We have to. Thank God for the work of the church engaging it. But when I was at that funeral and I looked at those individuals, I thought, how you age has to be centered on Christ, right? If you're a people of faith. Mother Teresa, when I met her in 85, and then, long story, my story of how I met my wife on page 84. Mother sent 35 nuns to our wedding. But I tell the story of Mary. It's a great story. That poor woman's been married to me 33 years. But she's getting even with me, because now I'm my mother-in-law is now, we see her every day. So there's a saying that behind every successful man is a surprised mother-in-law. So I have that going. I love Ann, 93, and Mary's with her. Mary's not here because she's still mad we're giving the royalties from this book away. This beautiful book that we hope you get. I sound like Trump, the beautiful book. But when Mary was pregnant with our third child, we were living in Tallahassee, and Mother was coming to Washington, and I wanted to meet her. And so she could bless our baby. You know, I wanted to see her. And so we left the other two children, angels, behind and flew up for the day. And we got to the gift of peace where Mother was, and she came out in the lobby and she said, Mary, you're pregnant. When are you due? And Mary said, well, my due date's August 8th, but I think I'm going to be early. And Mother Teresa said to her, well, no, you're going to have that baby on my birthday. I said, Mother, your birthday's August 26th. If she's 18 days late, my life's going to be a living heck. To make a long story short, on the night of August 25th, Mary goes into labor. We're like, oh my gosh, the angels are at work. We're going to have a little girl. We're going to name her Teresa. Midnight strikes, 1:20 in the morning. Out comes the baby. The doctor says, congratulations, you have a little boy. And my wife, and I'm not kidding, said, are you sure? And the doctor said, here's how we tell. Here's how we learned in med school. It used to be this easy, wasn't it? Not so simple anymore, is it? It's another subject. But I want to focus on two aspects of aging, because in that story, we had the baby. I get a contact from Calcutta that mother's dying, and Sister Priscilla said, if you want to see her, you need to get back here. And so with Mary's permission, and my mom came over, Sandy McMurtry, her close friend, and I flew to Calcutta. The sisters meet us at the airport, and they say, she's on oxygen, we should go straight to the hospital. We went straight to the hospital. When we got to her hospital room, there was this buzz around. She's on the 6th floor of this Woodlands Center, and they'd given a suite for the sisters to congregate outside of Mother's room, and there was all this activity. I was like, oh no, please, she didn't die before I got to see her. Please, Lord. And I said, did Mother die? And they said, no. They said, she was laying there, laying on her back, and she was pointing up, and they were all looking up. What is she? Is she having a vision? What is she pointing at? And she saw their confusion, and she moved her mask over, and she said, I'm going home. I'm going home to God. It was a beautiful, simple statement of how she had a compass in life, that she knew she had come from God and was going home to God. This can get lost in the aging experience when we get caught up in the maze of medical treatments and test tubes and all of the different aspects of modern medical care. We lose sight of the spiritual, because dying isn't simply a medical moment. It's a deeply spiritual, personal, and emotional moment. It's a time that calls for companionship. It's a time that is rich with meaning and purpose, and Mother Teresa's life showed it. As I said, I knew her the last 12 years of her life, saw her regularly. The 2 years I was full-time with her and got to travel, she had aches, and she had 5 heart attacks. She had a stroke. She had broken bones, her arm, shoulder, legs, ribs. She then had this darkness. I spent a chapter on it. The church is going to study this for decades, the darkness Mother Teresa lived. So she had challenges. She knew there was a cross in it, but she knew there was a crown there awaiting. She was going home to God, to that moment when Jesus would say, come, my beloved, enter the kingdom. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. Come, my beloved, it was prepared for you before the time of creation. This mystery of God's preparing the kingdom for us if we simply trust Him like she did and follow like she did. And we don't have to be saints to age with dignity, to approach God with confidence, to accept our sufferings and all that comes with aging, and to realize that in the midst of them, we are living an evangelical moment. That's Mother Teresa's lesson. That our aging experience is for others. It's an evangelical witness that I believe that this cross has meaning and purpose, that I can unite myself in the midst of sufferings. And I can also be loved like Jesus was loved on the cross. There by His mother looking at Him, that love exchange between mother and son, so powerful, so rich. The pietà that shows that tenderness between mother and child. So Jesus allowed Himself to be loved. Mother did too. The sisters, I remember that time in the hospital. Mother was being spooked. She was there. She had a rosary around her neck. She just had her simple white gown on, a headpiece on, covering her hair. And Sister Norma was feeding her custard. She was so weak at that point. You know, she let herself be loved. She had prepared herself for that moment. You know, Mother had prepared her sisters for that moment. Mother knew she was going home to God directly in front of her hospital bed. And we had Mass there in the morning, 6 a.m. And I talk about it in the book. There was Mother looking at the Blessed Sacrament, you know. There was an image of Our Lady. There was a photo of the little flower. There was Mother, just there, that union, that prayer. And at the time of communion, I was to the right of her bed, and the priest came over, and when he gave her the host, she raised her head from the bed as if to be kissed by her spouse, to be greeted by her spouse. Mother knew she had come from God, and she knew that she was going home to God. Very powerful witness, evangelical. And the sisters watched her to see how she prayed. She said, accept and offer. She had a beautiful saying once. She said, accept whatever Jesus gives and give whatever Jesus takes with a big smile. And that's how she aged. That's a lesson she teaches us, and she prepared her sisters around her for going home to God. When I left Florida government and I started Aging with Dignity, I had lived in her home for people with AIDS and watched a lot of people die. This was in the 80s when there was no medicine. And so we had people just dying, sometimes 2 a day in the hospice where I worked that Mother had opened. She opened these way ahead of everybody, way ahead of government. She was opening homes for the dying. And so I talked to her about assisted suicide because this is going to be a wildfire if we're not careful. And we have to learn the lessons from the pro-life movement. What we've learned along the way through community pregnancy centers to offer an alternative, to love the individuals, to accompany them. We have to learn those lessons because assisted suicide is going to have a seductive appeal to allow people to have control over their end game. And why not? Why can't I just rush to its conclusion? You know, forgetting that God is the giver of life, we can rush these things, can't we? So Mother said, you know, I talked to her about Aging with Dignity, and she wrote a letter. She addressed it to the people of Florida at that time to encourage this. And so we've been 27 years. But I wrote this document, 5 Wishes, because it allows people to have a hopeful vision. If all it's about is ventilators and feeding tubes, no one's going to talk about their end game. If it's about forgiveness, comfort, how I want to be treated, what I want my loved ones to know, that's why I developed this. It's a discussion document. It's also a legal document. I prepared it with the American Bar Association, had the good help of doctors, nurses, and others as I drafted it. And now 43 million copies, 34 languages. By God's grace, it's being used to help people have a hopeful vision. When's the last time at Mass you heard a priest give a homily about aging on this subject? We need to go back to our dioceses, back to our parishes, and start having programs, whether it's 5 Wishes or something else, that helps individuals plan for and discuss end-of-life care and be prepared, and to prepare those around them. And to let them know, in here it says, when we allow people to write about, when I'm asked what my life meant, tell them this. You know, Mary and I wrote pages to our 5 Wishes that we want our children to know, you know, and our grandchildren to know. This past year, we put this out, Finishing Life Faithfully, a Guide for Catholics on End-of-Life Care. Bishop Noonan has endorsed both of these, so has Archbishop Wensky, Bishop Walk, Cardinal O'Malley, Cardinal Dolan, because we don't really know the teachings of the Church, do we, sometimes, about end-of-life care. So this has 60 footnotes. It's all tied to U.S. Catholic bishop statements, the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, John Paul the Great statements, to help people. Because when Mary and I filled out our 5 Wishes, we said, I want the teachings of the Catholic Church followed if I'm no longer able to communicate my life support wishes. And my kids were like, well, what are the teachings of the Church? Well, look it up. No, they're not going to. You know, so we made it easy in a little booklet. We do this because we are called, and you know this well or you wouldn't be here, to celebrate that Annunciation moment of Jesus, where the angel said, great will be his dignity, that we're sharers of this. That's why Mother picked them up in the gutters. That's why she protected them in the womb. She saw the divine imprint on their lives, and she realized that we had to defend and protect and safeguard that sanctity of life, and she did it. That's why she had orphanages. She'd say, if you don't want the child, give them to us. We will get the child adopted. And then for the severely handicapped children, she still cares for them. I was in Calcutta in May I go back there now. I do talks with the sisters all over the world now because a lot of the sisters that have joined never met Mother. Mother's been gone home to God now since 1997. It's hard to believe. True, though. And so I'm with these sisters, to help them embrace the charism of their mother, this gritty, great woman, this mother, in an age where motherhood's denigrated and demeaned, attacked. This is the fruit of feminism that led so many women down a path where they were deceived and misled, that somehow, and it wasn't just natural motherhood. Mother Teresa didn't have natural biological children, yet who was a greater mother than she? This idea that your femininity could be expressed through your maternal love and instincts, this has to be celebrated. And this was the Annunciation moment that Our Lady teaches us, that Mother Teresa teaches us. And that's why I think for you to be called to this work to help celebrate the beauty of life, to plan for your end game. I saw Mother Teresa 10 weeks before she went home to God. At that time, she was 87. She was in a wheelchair. I told several stories of those last years of her life because I want people to know how she aged. And these are stories from her sisters who lived with her. Those nuns are too busy to write books, but they told me the stories. And I finally was able to write it when I left Ave Maria University and COVID hit. I had finally the chance to write the book. And the sisters, and of course I have a debt to the Missionaries of Charity sisters because they taught me everything I know about aging, about end-of-life care, but most of all Mother, my debt to Mother. I can't even imagine where my life would have gone without Mother, Well, here she was in her wheelchair. I was in the Bronx, New York. Mary and the 3 children were down in the courtyard playing. I was up on the top floor of her convent there on East 145th Street. And Mother was, at that point, so tired, and she was forgetful. And her judgment wasn't like it was before. I'd never met anyone, by the way, that had the kind of judgment she had. And when I met her at 75, I can't even imagine what it was before then. But in meetings, I tell many stories of the legal work I did for her. President Bush, when he would introduce me, he'd say, Towey was her lawyer. What kind of world do we live in when even Mother Teresa had to have a lawyer? But she liked to sue people. No, I'm kidding. She didn't like to sue people. She didn't like to sue people. But there she was. And so I got choked up. And I just said, Mother, I'm going to miss you when you're on the other side. She just looked at me and she said, I have my bags packed. She had her bags packed. Beautiful thought. Are our bags packed? What are we carrying in them? Regrets? With forgiveness we've withheld? What do we lug around through life? Relationships broken? To be at peace. This is the process of growth, spiritual growth. It's the journey of love that we're invited to live in our end games. And I stretched the meeting out as long as I could, and then a sister came up, put her hands on the handles and said, it's time for Mother to rest. And I said, Mother, before you go, can Mary and the children come up and get your blessing? Before I could finish that request, Mother had stood up from her wheelchair and looked out the window, and she said, where are the children? Where are the children? Beautiful, isn't it? That childlike heart. This is the fruit of a life lived for others. This was what she had because of her. She said a life that's not lived for others is not worth living. That's why you're here. Your life is for others. It's for the unborn. It's for the dying. It's for the disabled who are being pushed toward assisted suicide. Your life is a gift for others. May Mother Teresa be your intercessor. May she guide your journey, inspire you, and accompany you as you go home to God one day. God bless you. Thank you. So we have 5 minutes for questions. Is that right? Is that still okay, or do you want to wrap up? 5 minutes and 14 seconds according to this. Well, I'll take one or two questions real quickly. Quick questions about Mother, anything, my hairdresser, anything. Anything at all. If not, we'll wrap up. There's a question over there. Someone's pointing. Just shout it out. I'll hear it.
The mics.
I'll hear it because we're...
Is it on?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm from St. Matthew Parish in Winter Haven, and I'm a nurse. So I'm interested in your book, but I also am interested in what you've seen in the last 10 or 15 years, because what I've seen in medical care is distressing as a nurse. I fully believe in advanced directives and healthcare surrogates, but we're living in a world where we have doctors and nurses who, like probably your children and mine, would say, what do you mean by Catholic values? Or even you're dealing with physicians and nurses who don't even have a biblical worldview, so therefore they tell you it's comfort measures only, but they're really giving these nurses orders to just give morphine 7 milligrams.
Right. So
Whether somebody needs it or not.
Your question is about pain management and the abuse of it. I think we have to be careful with that. Five Wishes has a statement at the beginning: nothing shall be done or omitted with the intention of hastening my death. So that's a statement very clearly against the abuse of the use of morphine. Pain management is important too in the church. I have a whole page and a half on the pain management. The church is teaching on it. That's in the Finishing Life Faithfully that Cardinal Dolan and others are endorsing and promoting its use. So, but you're right, it can be abused, and we've got to be very careful when we educate individuals that have someone that's your healthcare agent that understands you want the teachings of the Catholic Church followed. In my document, in Mary's document of Five Wishes, we said we want our pain managed, but we want to be conscious as much as possible and to find that right balance and to have that discussion with the nurse. So thank you for that point.
Thank you.
Last question before I get the hook. Yes, you can just yell it. How do I what? How do I feel about the do not resuscitate order? Well, I have a section on it in here too that's a longer answer. I'll give you the short one. If you are, like my mom was 96 when she had a massive stroke, and we had a DNR in place there, because statistically there is 0 chance that you're going to leave that hospital after you've been resuscitated. And you're just going to have your ribs cracked, and it's going to be a traumatic moment for everybody around. And one of the sisters had this happen to her. One of the first 12 that followed Mother from the very beginning died in New York, and this happened to her, and it was traumatic for all the sisters. So for a person in that situation, it's wise to have a do not resuscitate order in place, because you're in the process of dying. We are going to die. It's not appropriate for someone who's young to have a DNR in place. Why wouldn't you resuscitate that individual? Because the likelihood that they can recover is so great, and it's not going to be that traumatic relative to someone who's bony and brittle. And so the discussion with your doctor about a do not resuscitate order, Mary and I have clear instructions that when we're in the process of dying, we don't want, if it's not going to help us. But if in the doctor's judgment it can possibly lead to something that would allow us to continue life, yeah, you choose life. So it's got to be discerned, but there's not a blanket answer. They're good, they're bad. I worry about POLSTs. They're called Physician's Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, because those are medical orders that are signed by a doctor that can be put into place in situations where when you recover and get better, you need to get rid of that order. So you got to be careful with those, but that's a long discussion. And I'm happy to answer questions over there because my time's up. And by the way, one of the things you learn as a Catholic speaker, never interrupt the beginning of Holy Mass and the Eucharist. So God bless you, and God bless you for being here.
Thank you, Jim.